Have you ever wondered how an ordinary child becomes the kind of adult the world later calls a monster? You hear people say, "He must have been born evil," as if that explains anything. But the truth usually starts in a living room that never felt like home, and a childhood that ended before it ever began. Roy was that kid. By 6, he was growing up in a small apartment where his father yelled more than he spoke, and his mother barely reacted to anything. The punishments were harsh, especially when alcohol got involved. She didn't step in, she barely engaged at all. At school, Roy was isolated and bullied. Teachers describe him as emotionless, but also well-behaved because he never complains. A childhood like that stacks up adverse childhood experiences very fast. ACE scores strongly correlate with antisocial patterns later in life. The brain adjusts by disconnecting. This is called dissociation, a mental shutdown during overwhelming events where feelings go numb so the moment hurts less. Attachment, then fractures. When caregivers are inconsistent or frightening, the child develops insecure attachment. Empathy doesn't form well because no one mirrored emotion back to them. More severe cases create reactive attachment disorder. The child stops expecting comfort, or disorganized attachment, where the caregiver is both wanted and feared. Affection starts feeling unpredictable, almost like a coin toss with teeth. With no steady emotional input, affect dysregulation forms. Emotions hit too hard, too weak, or at the wrong time, a slow burn fuse found in many violent personalities. By 9, Roy develops a habit of imagining scenarios where he has total control. He steals small things from classmates, not because he needs them, but to see how long until someone notices. He begins lying with precision and without remorse. Punishments do not feel like a lesson, rather inconvenience. He watches people struggle with an almost clinical curiosity, studying reactions instead of feeling anything about them. People around him stop looking like potential friends and start looking like objects, useful, useless, or in the way. Early fantasies become an internal escape. When a child feels powerless, the mind builds imagined worlds where control isn't random. It's called fantasy compensation, using inner scenarios to counteract real-life helplessness. These fantasies don't stay innocent. They evolve into structured power rehearsals. There is also the notion of hostile attribution bias. Kids from chaotic households often interpret neutral actions as threats because their expectation for harm is already set. A neutral look becomes disrespectful. A simple comment becomes provocation. The perception system twists ordinary cues into danger. Later, callous unemotional traits begin forming. Reduced guilt, shallow affect, minimal remorse. Not because the child enjoys cruelty, but because emotional feedback never developed correctly. Neurodevelopmental research shows blunted responses in areas tied to empathy, which leaves them detached from consequences. For kids like Roy, cognitive distortions develop early. They start thinking, people deserve what happens to them. No one helps me, so why should I care about them? These beliefs become the groundwork. Distorted logic replacing emotional connection. By 14, the home gets worse. His father becomes more violent. His mother becomes nearly absent. Roy becomes the strange kid at school, quiet, unpredictable in ways others don't understand. He starts torturing small animals with preparation, choosing the place, the timing, the method. He documents everything with cold precision. This is the point where the antisocial path strengthens. The kids like Roy develop so-called conduct disorder. This childhood disorder is characterized by manipulation, deceit, cruelty, and a calculated approach to wrongdoing. But what matters is the direction. These patterns are preparations for a future self. When they persist into adulthood, they often transform into antisocial personality disorder, disregard for others, chronic lying, manipulation, and a complete absence of guilt. The rituals he builds around the acts, planning, controlling the scene, documenting details, are behavioral ritualization. The mind is writing a script it will later replay, refining it like a dark routine. Many serial offenders start exactly here, not just doing things but turning them into patterns they repeat, polish, and hide. In psychology, there is a controversial system for predicting violent behavior in kids called McDonald Triad. 3 behaviors that show up together in some deeply troubled kids: hurting animals, setting fires, and chronic bedwetting earlier in childhood. Each one points to a different internal crack: animal cruelty showing detachment from pain, fire setting showing a craving for control through destruction, and bedwetting revealing hidden stress the child can't express. When these 3 appear together, they form a pattern that suggests a mind already drifting into the darkness. The neurological profile behind someone like Roy forms early and reshapes how he responds to the world. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control, decision-making, and long-term planning, functions weakly. That means quick actions, limited hesitation, and almost no internal pause. The ability to hold back is minimal because the system meant to regulate behavior is underpowered. The amygdala, the part of the brain that detects threat and generates fear, shows low reactivity. Fear does not register. Situations that should send alarms through the body create almost no response. This produces emotional numbness. Pain, distress, and warning signals feel distant, making violent acts easier to commit because there is no internal resistance. The reward system adds another layer. For some individuals, aggression triggers the brain's reward pathways. This is sensation-seeking and stimulus hunger, craving strong reactions because ordinary experiences feel flat. The mind starts reaching for extremes simply to feel something distinct. Together, these systems shape a brain wired for low fear, weak restraint, and a constant pull toward high-intensity behavior. By 16, Roy's house is a mess. His father hits him more often. His mother drinks heavily. Roy stops caring about anyone at school. One night, his father hits him again, but this time something inside Roy doesn't react. The fear he carried for years disappears. Later that night, he imagines his first murder, not to escape, but to take control. Soon after, he kills a stray cat with full preparation, choosing the place, arranging the scene, controlling every step. He keeps trophies. There is no excitement afterward, just a strong feeling of mental clarity. This shift begins with a stressor strong enough to activate traits already waiting beneath the surface. Psychology calls this the diathesis stress model. A predisposition meets a trigger. Think of it like this. Everyone carries certain psychological seeds inside them. Some seeds are harmless. Others sit quietly, waiting for the right conditions to grow. And those conditions are usually stressful events, loss, humiliation, or a moment that cuts deeper than it should. When the internal vulnerability, the diathesis, finally meets a strong enough external blow, the stress, the mind crosses a line it can't step back from. For Roy, the violent outburst from his father becomes the moment where fantasy and reality blend into one path. The first violent act carries its own psychology. The clarity he feels isn't excitement. It's the feeling of his inner world finally matching the outer one. For years, he lived in his head, imagining control. Now, the real world reflects that fantasy, and something in him clicks into place. He isn't driven by emotions, he isn't overwhelmed or panicking. It's the opposite. His mind feels sharp, steady, almost mechanical. The behavior feels planned like a script he's been rehearsing quietly for years. This is where moral disengagement shows up. It's a mental process where the mind detaches behavior from guilt. Instead of thinking, "This is wrong," it shifts into, "This doesn't apply to me." The usual rules, empathy, remorse, hesitation, get switched off. Not because he argues with them, but because they stop feeling relevant. The act becomes something his internal logic fully permits. At 21, Roy leaves home, but nothing inside him changes. He keeps quiet jobs where no one notices him. And then, one unremarkable Friday, his first kill happens. He follows the woman from the bar to the dark alley. Then he strangles her to death. When it's over, he feels a weird clarity instead of fear. He takes her necklace, a trophy, for confirmation that the line he'd been circling since childhood has finally been crossed. After that, he revisits scenes mentally and sometimes physically. The cycle repeats: stress, fantasy, planning, action, relief. The compulsion loop forms here. Violent offenders often repeat the act because the moment after the release is the only time their mind feels steady, That brief relief reinforces the behavior, making the cycle stronger each time. Fantasies turn into rituals. Patterns develop. How he chooses the target, the setup, the sequence, the trophy he takes. These rituals give the act structure, and in some cases, paraphilic elements appear, associations between control, intensity, and arousal. The fantasy becomes part of the act as much as the act itself. The illusion of control plays a great role here. Many serial offenders begin seeing themselves as the hidden director of their own horror story. Roy starts believing he's outside the rules other people live by. He sees himself as the one pulling the strings, moving unseen, arranging the scene exactly the way he wants. At this stage, traits of antisocial personality disorder appear in full. Deceit used as a tool, no guilt, and manipulation that feels natural instead of forced. Emotional detachment deepens. He cannot generate normal empathy because his emotional system never built the structure for it. Narcissistic elements rise as well, believing he's above other people, seeing himself as more calculating, more aware, more in control. The pattern becomes a system he no longer questions. So, to sum up, not all children who suffer become serial killers, but most serial killers once were children who suffered. Roy's violence is the result of compounded failures: familial, emotional, developmental, and psychological. The world only saw what he eventually became. It never understood what shaped him in the first place. The cycle behind it is straightforward. Unmet needs turn into distorted coping. Distorted coping turns into twisted logic, and twisted logic eventually turns into violence. It's a progression formed slowly, piece by piece, while no one is looking. Because some children learn to hide from the darkness, others learn to shake its hand.